It was just another rainy evening at a small diner tucked away on the edge of town. The place buzzed softly with the clatter of dishes and quiet conversation, but for Maria, the young waitress working the late shift, it was business as usual. Wiping down tables with a tired smile, she didn't expect her night, or her life, to take a dramatic turn. She didn't know that someone was quietly watching her from the corner booth, a man who wasn't just another customer. He was a billionaire CEO, dressed casually to blend in, and he'd come here for more than just a meal. Maria was the kind of person who noticed when others were hurting. That's why, when a group of children walked in soaked from the rain, shivering, and without any adults around, she acted without hesitation. They looked no older than 10 or 11, with worn clothes and hungry eyes. She didn't ask too many questions. Instead, she offered them warm food, hot cocoa, and even found some towels in the back to help them dry off. She didn't care that they couldn't pay. She only cared that they were safe. The man in the corner, Mr. Donovan Hale, had built a tech empire from the ground up. Known for his no-nonsense business style and sharp instincts, few knew the softer side of him. He rarely showed emotion, especially in public. But tonight, something about the scene unfolding in front of him struck a nerve. He watched silently as Maria kneeled beside the kids, speaking gently, offering kindness without expecting anything in return. She didn't know it, but every move she made was being noticed, and not just as a passing observation. What Maria also didn't know was that the kids had nowhere to go. They were recently orphaned, left to fend for themselves after a tragic accident. They'd been hiding from authorities, scared of being separated, and as fate would have it, they'd stumbled into the one place where someone still saw them as more than a problem to fix. As Maria tucked a blanket around the youngest child, Donovan Hale made a quiet note to himself. He had come to the diner to escape his corporate world for a night. Instead, he found a story of real humanity, of quiet heroism. But he wasn't ready to reveal himself just yet. Little did Maria know, her small act of kindness had set something bigger in motion, something that would soon change all of their lives in ways no one could have predicted. Maria moved back behind the counter, watching the kids out of the corner of her eye as they huddled close, grateful for the warmth. She didn't ask too many questions, but she could see it in their eyes. They'd been through more than kids ever should. One of the older boys, maybe 12, kept glancing toward the door like he was expecting someone to barge in. The youngest clung to a tattered stuffed bear, barely touching his food even though his stomach must have been empty. Inside, Maria's heart ached. She knew what it was like to grow up with uncertainty. Her mother had raised her alone while working 3 jobs, and she remembered nights where dinner was just toast and silence. So when she saw those kids, something inside her lit up. A quiet determination to do something, anything to help. What she didn't know was that Donovan Hale was still watching. The billionaire CEO had built his fortune on algorithms and strategy, always staying 10 steps ahead. But this was different. He had come to this sleepy diner to think through a pending deal, maybe even get away from the noise of boardrooms and investors. He hadn't expected to find himself caught in a real-life story more gripping than any business case. And he definitely hadn't expected to see someone so genuine, so selfless, in a world that often felt cold and calculated. From his seat in the dim corner, Donovan slowly stirred his coffee, deep in thought. There was something about Maria's kindness that unsettled him, not in a bad way, but in a way that stirred memories he'd pushed away. He remembered a time, long ago, when he'd needed help and no one came. Watching her now brought those feelings back in waves. But there was more going on than Maria realized. Those kids hadn't just wandered in by chance. Earlier that day, a call had gone out from a local shelter. They were looking for a group of missing children. The story hadn't reached the evening news yet, but it was only a matter of time. If someone recognized them, they'd be separated into foster care, possibly across different homes. Maria didn't know any of this. All she saw was scared kids who needed kindness. And without hesitation, she was willing to give it. But with every passing minute, the risk of exposure grew. And Donovan Hale, sitting just feet away, found himself facing a choice. Walk away, like he always did, or get involved in something real, something messy and unpredictable. The diner's clock ticked softly. Outside, the rain fell harder. Inside, lives were quietly colliding, and none of them knew just how much was at stake. The night dragged on, and the diner slowly emptied. A few truckers paid their checks and left with a nod to Maria. She smiled back, but her mind was still on the kids. They had fallen asleep in a booth near the back, curled up against each other, empty plates pushed aside. Maria grabbed an extra blanket from the storage room and gently draped it over them. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight they were safe. Donovan hadn't moved. He sat quietly, his food untouched, watching from behind his coffee cup. He should have left hours ago, but something wouldn't let him. He wasn't used to feeling unsure. In the world of billion-dollar decisions and high-stakes meetings, hesitation was a weakness. But this was different. This wasn't about business or numbers. This was about people. And something told him that whatever was happening tonight was far bigger than just a kind waitress and some lost children. In the kitchen, Maria's coworker, Jamie, peeked out from the back. "You sure about this?" she asked in a low voice, nodding toward the kids. "It's sweet, but it's risky. You don't know who they are. What if the police come around?" Maria sighed. "I know, but I couldn't turn them away, Jamie. Look at them. They're just kids. Scared. Alone. What was I supposed to do? Pretend I didn't see?" Jamie didn't answer. She just looked at Maria for a long second before disappearing back into the kitchen. Meanwhile, across town, a local caseworker named Andrea was working late, her desk cluttered with missing child reports. Her phone buzzed with a message. Someone had spotted a group of kids matching the description, possibly near a diner off the highway. Andrea grabbed her coat. Time was running out. Back at the diner, the storm outside had grown worse. Thunder cracked in the distance, and the lights flickered. Maria checked the front door, making sure it was locked, just in case. She didn't want anyone coming in and making a scene, especially not tonight. Donovan finally stood, slipping a $100 bill under his plate. He walked past the sleeping kids and paused near the counter. Maria looked up, surprised. For a second, their eyes met. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. Maria blinked. "Thanks, but I didn't do much." "You did more than most," he replied, then walked out into the rain. Maria watched him go, unaware that the man she just spoke to was one of the wealthiest men in the country. And as his car disappeared into the dark, headlights turned onto the diner's street, someone else was coming. Someone who might not have the same good intentions. The wind howled outside as the rain hammered the windows. Maria stood at the counter, nervously glancing toward the sleeping kids. Something didn't feel right. Her instincts, the same ones that told her to help them in the first place, were now whispering that trouble was close. She tried to shake the feeling, telling herself it was just the storm, or maybe the weight of everything hitting her all at once. Out on the street, the pair of headlights grew closer, finally stopping in front of the diner. A black SUV. The engine stayed running. The driver didn't get out. Maria's breath caught in her throat. Inside the SUV, a man in a dark jacket watched the building. He'd been hired to find the kids. Not by family, but by a distant relative trying to claim custody for personal gain. If he returned them, there'd be a payout. The man didn't care about their future, only the reward, and he followed a trail straight to this quiet diner. Back inside, Maria stepped closer to the door, pretending to wipe the glass as she tried to get a better look. Her heart raced. She couldn't see the driver clearly, but something about the way the vehicle just sat there, engine purring like a warning, made her stomach twist. Meanwhile, across town, Donovan Hale's car slowed as he neared a traffic light. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, distracted. He should have felt relieved to be heading home, but all he could think about was Maria and those kids. Something didn't sit right with him. He reached for his phone, opening a search on recent missing children reports. In seconds, their photos popped up. His gut sank. It was them. He turned the car around. At the diner, Jamie emerged from the back, eyes wide. "There's someone outside," she whispered. "He hasn't come in, just sitting there. What should we do?" Maria glanced toward the back booth. The kids were still asleep. She lowered her voice. "Call someone. Not the cops yet. Just someone who might know what's going on." Jamie hesitated, then nodded and disappeared again. The front door handle jiggled. Maria froze. The man outside finally stepped out of the SUV, glancing around the empty street. He walked slowly, deliberately. His eyes scanned the windows, then landed on the kids inside. Maria quickly moved in front of them, blocking them from view. The bell above the door jingled softly. He stepped inside, water dripping from his coat. And just as he looked up to speak, another car pulled in sharply behind his. Donovan Hale had returned. The man at the door paused as Donovan's sleek black car screeched to a stop behind his SUV. For a split second, there was silence, the kind that hangs in the air before something big happens. Maria's eyes darted between the stranger dripping water onto the floor and the headlights now casting long shadows through the diner's windows. She didn't know who was behind the wheel, but something told her this wasn't just coincidence. The man straightened his shoulders and took a step forward. "I'm looking for some kids," he said, his voice low and even. "Saw a group fitting their description come in here earlier. You seen them?" Maria's stomach tightened. She forced a calm expression. "Just regular customers tonight. Nobody unusual." His eyes swept the room, lingering for a beat too long on the booth in the back. Then the door opened again. Donovan walked in, his presence commanding without a word. His eyes locked on the stranger instantly, reading the situation in a heartbeat. He stepped up beside Maria, not saying who he was, but his confidence made the man bristle. "Problem here?" Donovan asked, cool and quiet. The man shifted. "Just doing my job. Someone sent me to collect those kids. Said they wandered off. I'm here to make sure they're safe." Maria didn't buy it, and Donovan didn't either. His voice sharpened. "If you were with social services, you wouldn't be showing up at midnight in an unmarked car with no ID. So unless you want to explain yourself to the real authorities, I suggest you leave." The man's jaw tightened. He glanced between Maria and Donovan, weighing his odds. "You don't know who you're messing with," he muttered, backing toward the door. Donovan stepped forward. "Actually, I do. And you've got 10 seconds before I make a call you won't like." The man retreated, slamming the door behind him as he stormed back to his SUV. The vehicle rolled to life and sped off into the storm. Maria turned to Donovan, still breathless. Who are you?" Before he could answer, a new sound pierced the tension, a soft chime from the counter. Jamie's phone buzzed with an alert. She picked it up, eyes going wide. "You guys, there's more. A breaking report just dropped online. The kids aren't just missing. There's a custody battle. The man who came in, he's connected to someone suing the state to gain control of the children's inheritance." Maria blinked. Inheritance. Donovan's face darkened. What none of them knew was that the children weren't just lost or forgotten. They were heirs to a fortune tangled in legal chaos. And now it wasn't just about keeping them safe. It was about keeping them alive. Rain continued to pour outside as Maria stared at the phone in Jamie's hand, her heart pounding. Inheritance? Custody battle? She looked back at the sleeping children, suddenly seeing them in a new light. They weren't just scared orphans. Someone out there saw them as a paycheck. A target. And they were in more danger than she realized. Donovan stepped away from the counter and pulled out his phone. "I know a judge," he said, voice steady but urgent. "If these kids are tied to a legal dispute, we need protection in place, tonight." He tapped out a message and then looked at Maria. "We can't wait. If that guy comes back with backup, they'll try to take them by force." Maria's throat tightened. "So what do we do?" "We move them. Now." Together, they gently woke the children. Confused and drowsy, the oldest boy, Eli looked up at Maria. "Are we in trouble?" Maria knelt beside him. "No, sweetie, but we have to go somewhere safe, okay? You trust me." Eli looked at her, then nodded slowly. Within minutes, they were out the back door, covered in coats and blankets. Donovan led them to his car, the kind of luxury vehicle that seemed wildly out of place behind the humble diner. Maria hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the place where her life had been so small just hours earlier. As the car pulled away, taillights fading into the wet darkness, a second black SUV turned onto the street, this time with more than one figure inside. Donovan drove fast, taking back roads, his fingers tight on the wheel. "We'll head to my private property. No one can get in without clearance. Once we're there, I'll have lawyers file an emergency protection order. The judge owes me a favor." Maria glanced at him. "You never told me your name." He gave a small smile. "Donovan Hale." Her eyes widened. She'd heard the name. Everyone had. By the time they arrived at Donovan's estate, gates sliding open like something out of a movie, police and legal advisors were already on standby. The kids were quickly taken inside, given fresh clothes and comfort, this time surrounded by people who were truly there to help. But just as Maria let out a breath of relief, a call came through on Donovan's phone. He stepped aside, listening silently. When he returned, his face was unreadable. "What is it?" Maria asked. "They just confirmed something," he said slowly. "The kids' parents weren't killed in an accident." Maria froze. "What do you mean?" Donovan looked toward the room where the children sat. They were targeted, and whoever's behind it, they're still out there. The storm outside hadn't passed. It was just beginning. Maria sat on the edge of a plush chair in the living room of Donovan Hale's estate, a far cry from the worn vinyl booths of the diner. The children were finally sleeping again, this time tucked safely into guest rooms with full bellies and warm beds. For the first time in what felt like forever, they weren't running. They were safe. Donovan paced quietly across the room, phone in hand, speaking in hushed tones to his legal team. The truth about the children's parents had come as a shock. Their deaths, once thought to be a tragic accident, were now under investigation. There had been inconsistencies in the police report, details that suggested foul play. And at the center of it all was the same distant relative who had hired the man from the diner. Maria stared out the window into the night, her thoughts still racing. She hadn't meant to get caught up in any of this. She was just a waitress trying to make it through a shift. But somehow, something in her heart told her she'd done what she was meant to do. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she'd never go back to being just another face behind a counter. Not after this. Donovan returned, his expression softer now. Protective custody is in place. The court granted emergency guardianship to a temporary foundation I control. No one's taking those kids unless it's through the law. Maria looked up at him. "So what happens now?" He hesitated, then smiled. "Now we make sure they get the life they deserve. No more hiding, no more fear. Just a chance to grow up like every kid should." "And me?" she asked, half joking, half serious. He gave her a long look. "You helped change their story. I could use someone like you, someone with a real heart, to help run the foundation." Maria blinked. "You're offering me a job." "I'm offering you a purpose," he said. A week later, the diner sat quiet, closed temporarily with a handwritten sign on the door. The small-town gossip had started, but no one knew the full story, and maybe that was for the best. Maria stood in a sunlit room filled with books, toys, and laughter, her new office at the children's home Donovan funded. She watched Eli and the others playing outside, the sound of their joy echoing through the halls. They were no longer orphans lost in the system. They were home. What started as a rainy night at a roadside diner had become something so much more. A story of courage, compassion, and unexpected heroes. And as Maria smiled at the life ahead, she realized some strangers don't just pass through your life. Some are meant to change it forever.